Thank you. My name is Beata Olahova and I represent the Roma Education Fund. I have been listening to the presentations before and I heard several times education to be one of the key priority areas for the national integration strategies. And I would like to go back to this, especially when this is connected to the strategy 2020 and the European benchmarks for education. As we know, the first benchmark is 95% of at least of those 4 years old and entering compulsory education will have access to preschool early childhood education services. The communication from April does not specifically address the early childhood education, except giving reference to the Good Start pilot project, which is being implemented recently by the Roma Education Fund. But this is a very important benchmark, and I think the 2020 strategy should definitely take into consideration the early childhood education. The fourth benchmark, European benchmark on education, speaks about the youth and upper tertiary education. This is also not part of the strategy, and this is one of a very important area where these should come in, especially when the European Parliament is going to monitor the spending of money that has been increased now for the Europe 2020 strategy.
First, you said we should supervise the strategies, talking about the Parliament. How is the Parliament going to do it, considering that at this moment, according to Bernard Shaw at the Columbia University, the level of Roma and Roma experts within the European institution equates with structural racism. You do not have expertise in the Parliament to do that. And the Parliament, unfortunately, didn't ever take a serious step to bring that expertise in. There are some extreme exceptions, like Mr. Soboda, who put lots of effort. I mean, he went to even to the ghetto where I work. Also, at the level of the Commission, there are people who do that, who put lots of effort into that. Commissioner Andor is one example which I know, and lots of people. But seriously, at this moment, European Union institutions prove in numbers that they are structural racist against the Roma. The second part is you talking about, I mean, Desideri brought a very good point, and I would like to take that one. The European Commission spent on a campaign, a very strong campaign in the European, it was in The Economist, it was on the Euronews, it was in all the airports. In total, we found out, asking the numbers, over 50 million euros on equal pay campaign. We couldn't find any numbers from the anti-discrimination unit on anti-gypsyism. Would the Parliament be ready, together with some NGOs, to monitor the activity of the anti-discrimination units of the Commission? I mean, will Romani Chris, ERC, somebody from the Parliament, be ready to investigate that in order to be a bit more confronting towards this issue? Thank you.
If I may, concerning the education and EU 2020, I fully agree. I mean, that's a very important issue. But I want to come back to what Valeria said about the Parliament's role. The first question, I mean, unfortunately, Mr. Scholz will not come, but probably he will be the next president of the Parliament, and perhaps we can arrange that we get also at least some expertise directly into the Parliament. But I think you are the experts, and we can never build up so much expertise as is present in this room or in many other events we had. I don't know what my colleagues here say also to your idea about the supervision. Several possibilities are. There is a possibility to make an initiative report. I'm very critical because it needs a lot of time and so on. There's a possibility that we, from the different political groups, come forward with the idea to have, let's say, an ad hoc committee out of different committees, especially, of course, civil liberties and social affairs. Because normally it is treated in civil liberties, but it's not only a question of civil liberties, it's social affairs. It's also, as Mr. Van Nistelrooy said, on regional affairs. So also that could be involved. Either a formal ad hoc committee or a working group out of the 3-4 committees who would go into the detail also of the question of the national strategies, involving, of course, civil society, as it here, the people who represent the different national strategy, but also civil society. I mean, these seminars and these things like today are very, very important, but finally we have to do it officially from the parliament side. Not here, you know, representing our group, but the parliament as such. I fully agree with that. So perhaps with the colleagues here on the table afterwards, we could also discuss, or in Strasbourg next week, how we could arrange that. And I think it would be very good to have such a working group or a special committee or whatever who would go into the details of the national strategies, ask those who develop the national strategies, but ask also the civil society, what is your opinion? Because when you criticize the Romanian strategy, I think the answer will come from the Romanian side. Unprepared, I cannot say who is right and who is how much right and how much wrong. But if we go into detail, then and there's a special committee, they could do it. So let's think about a way how to do it. I think it's very important.
Thank you very much. Mr. Van Nistelrooy, do you want also to react?
I totally agree that we have to work within our frameworks and with the European Commission, because they are bringing very often the facts and figures, etc. But you know, my experience till now is that, in fact, you have to work on your legal instruments. And once in the 7 years, we formulate the criteria in which the money is spent. And in that moment, in the next year, 2012, is the first reading, and then beginning 2013 is the finalization as we expect. We can talk about, the European Commission does, about ring-fencing money. You spend it in this way or you don't get it. Something else than giving it, and then the big debate starts about everything that might do well, the regional development. But you can bring it more precise. And this might be an approach. Not everybody will support, but we do it now. Talking about 20% for medium-sized and small companies. 20% for energy and energy efficiency. We do, our groups do. Why don't we go on in that way to make it more precise and to make it end and land in these national contracts with the European Union, because it will be less free than it was before. So I totally agree about the methods, but maybe come to us, talk with us, and talk with your governments and organizations in the next year. Thank you.
Orhan Tahir from Civil Society in Action, Bulgaria. I'm glad that Mr. Svoboda raised the question about number and representation of Roma in European Union. You know that Roma population in Europe exceeds the populations of countries like Denmark and Finland, but Roma are not properly represented in the European institutions. So do you think you can require Roma inclusion, or you can expect Roma inclusion in Sofia, Bucharest, Budapest, Prague, if you are not ready to show Roma inclusion in Brussels? I will give you just one example. Last year was set up the Roma task force, but as far as I know, there were no Roma in the Roma task force. And it's a very important question, what kind of examples European Commission and European Parliament give to the member state governments. My second question is, are you aware that national governments use EU funds to silence the voices of civil society in the member states? And what kind of partnership can exist, in your opinion, between the government and the NGOs expecting EU money from that government? This is a very crucial question. My last question to you is, European Commission didn't intervene in the cases of France and Italy, then what are the guarantees that European Commission would intervene if member states do not implement national Roma strategies? Thank you.
Several issues, and actually they are a bit related. We're talking about politics. This is what we're talking about. Institutions represent what the people in a certain moment decides by the view of the votes. And some places this system is more representative than in others. That's also a case, and in the parliament as well. So in that, what I say by that is that institutions, answering your question, evolve as well. It's people who make institutions. So in that sense, if we perceive that there is some lack of feeling of sensibility in some of the institutions, and the question is, either you change the mentality of the people working there, or you change the people. That's politics. That's what we have. That's what we are here, and that's what every of us is doing politics in several aspects. I'm not saying it's simple. I'm saying it's the way it is. However, going to the question you mentioned, which is one of the crucial issues, and Mr. Svoboda also said in the beginning, who is the European Union? Everybody has its role. The Commission has its role, and we as Parliament have our own role there. We as parliamentarians can do several things. One is to adopt legislative measures on the frames and in the fields that we have competences. That's something that we can do. On those fields that we don't have competence, we can make political statements, which, well, is not the best of the worlds, but at least is something that we can use in order to influence somehow the other institutions. But the third important instrument that we have, and that according to the Lisbon Treaty we have more and more and more, is the supervision of the Commission when they have to play the role of the implementation of the treaties. Individually, we can make this job via written questions and oral questions. We can have oral questions with debates which raises the issue and which put the issue on the table mediatically, socially, in terms of society, which is something that at least helps to bring attention and to confront positions. Why not? I mean, why not taking some of the, we have done it in the past, bringing the council members that we disagree with and confronting them with the majority position in the parliament. This is one of our roles. That's politics again. And on the other side, and bringing, well, taking the advantage of the proposal of the two main groups, because obviously you can imagine, I mean, the socialist group and the PP are the biggest. If they agree on something, this thing is done. If they disagree, well, then it depends of the majorities we can get with the other groups. But that's how it is. I mean, groups are playing also, and as long as there is a common ground where we all agree, fine. If there is no common ground, then we have to build majorities. And that's how we have to work on. And this is why also civil society has to establish this network with their allies within the institutions, including the parliament. Why? Simply because if you don't find that in your own member states, the allies that we're supposed to have are not, let's say, sympathetic enough with your causes, then you might find other member states groups, other member states members that can help on this. That's one of the advantages of the European Union, and that's one of the advantages we have here in the European Parliament, and we can play about this. Finally, a very short remark, because it was very important what it was mentioned on the education and the EU 2020 strategy. I mean, that's one of the lacks that the EU 2020 strategy has, the question of the minorities and non-discrimination, indeed. That's something that we can play with on the implementation of the process, on the strategy, but I mean, be sure that is something that we certainly have put on the table several times, and at least some of us are absolutely convinced that this is one of the lacks that we have to solve, that we have to reverse in the next months, years on the implementation of this.
Thank you very much. Mr. Svoboda?
Very briefly to the specific questions. You're right, it is very difficult to be convincing if one doesn't do it oneself enough for the promotion of inclusion in the own administration. But of course, many of the people are sent by the national governments. And if national governments don't send people from Roma community, it is difficult to get them. We in European Parliament from the different political groups have to have a competition on the language basis. We cannot say directly minority, although our group, the political group, I don't know about the other group, we have a program for inviting Roma to join us at least for some months and to be here and to be trained. And to give us input from the Roma perspective. So we do something on it, but perhaps we can do more, but at least we started to do that as a political group. On France and Italy, look, the Commission did something finally on France, especially after the European Parliament put a pressure, and this is one of the cases Mr. Romeva mentioned, where we got a majority, let's say a left liberal green majority, to put pressure on the Commission, and some of the EPP people supported us as well, and even some of the right-wing people supported us because it was seen very unfair. There are no guarantees in life, you know perfectly well. You have to fight for it, and you fight, and we fight, and sometimes we fight together, and if we fight together, we will be successful.
I'm David Mark from the Roma Civic Alliance from Romania. And just a short intervention and maybe reflection. I mean, we really need to have a reality check regarding the strategy and how things are going now. You need to know, respected members of the European Parliament, that there is no real political will in our countries to have this strategy a success. And that is very clear from the way that the strategy are now devised and not talking about implementation, because that's another story. But already from the starting point, we go on the wrong foot. When we talk about budgets and so on and so forth. But if this fails, there's a lot of expectation from us, from Roma civil society, but also from the communities. And all of us who are here will be somehow in the process, rubber stamping the process, while we know that there is no political will. Just an example, and I'm really sorry that your colleague from EPP left. In Romania, the government intends to transfer 1 billion euros from the ESF to the ERDF in order to say we are speeding up absorption because it's easier to invest and to spend money in roads and I don't know, whatever else in infrastructure. As if the problem in Romania has been solved or we spent a lot of EU funding for Roma. So this is a measure on an indicator of the real political will there. And we had talks also with the European Commission. And what we see is that the European Commission attitude is quite timid language, timid in the way they talk. We're gonna see you. I don't think the European Commission knows at this moment how they want to react on bad strategies, for example. So that's why we need the European Parliament on board, being probably a bit more confrontational, as the colleague said, being more clear, as it historically has been through its resolution, and ask the Commission and the Member States more strongly through the instruments that it has at disposal. And the second point that I want to make, and something that we never think, we are trying to do the Roma integration top-down. We want the Commission to pressure, we want the European Parliament to pressure, and the governments to adopt strategies and measures. But we never think about the communities, and they are totally out of the loop in this. They are not even informed about what's happening here or in the government or so on. They don't even know. And they do not know how to press their own local authorities on this. So my question to you, or my ask to you, would be try to help us to empower communities so that they can be a force from the community, from the grassroots, which can push mayors, local councillors, and so on to really implement these things. Because we might have strategies, but they will not be implemented unless this is happening. Thank you.
My name is Ilya Dinka, State Secretary, the President of National Agency for Roma. I don't want to have a contradiction with the civil society because you know very well the civil society have a very important role to implementing the national national strategy. But in autumn of 2010, it was already done proposal of National Action Plan, on which National Agency for Roma began the consulting process. Following to this meeting, the ministry involved in the process and the NGOs made their own proposal and observation, and those considered pertinent have been included into the plan. Committed to the transparency principle, the National Agency for Roma maintaining the civil society consultation, even of that during the process. In only the last 3 months, it was 3 meetings with the civil society, Roma and non-Roma NGOs, and I hope to have, after decision of this strategy, many meetings with the civil society, because it's very important in the national level and the local level. In another field, I want to say a little bit. In addition to the mentioned goals in the action field of strategy, we are strongly promoting the concept of integrated project in order to develop the local communities in 4 domains: action field, education, employment, housing and health. They represent that kind of project which will be implemented in the next financial programming 2015 till 20.
Mr. Riga, I will need to
only one
urge you,
second,
because we have very limited time and we need to have a bit of more discussion.
Yes, connected with this, we are militating in favor of setup of a financial line special destinated with the Roma people in order to access integrated project. Thank you.
My name is Ivan Ivanov. I'm the Executive Director of the European Roma Information Office in Brussels. What I wanted to underline here was said already to some extent from the previous speakers, but here we discuss of how the strategy would have an effect on the Roma communities, and how the responsible authorities should work with Roma communities. But we also here should be clear of how the implementers should work also with the general society. Otherwise, we'll end up of governments with good will, demonstrating political will to change the Roma situation, but at the same time, members, some groups of the general society have violent and discriminatory attitudes towards Roma groups. Like Hungarian government, which had a good political, not only political will, and commitment, who had a very successful presence to the EU for 6 months, has made so much good things for the Roma, not only in Hungary, but in Europe. But at the same time, we were witnessing violent attacks towards Roma in some parts of Hungary. The same situation in Bulgaria. Bulgarian government has clearly shown its commitment to the Roma situation, but for weeks we had some extreme nationalistic groups attacking Roma communities. Then we'll have some, as Desiderio said, schools enrolling Roma children. At the same time, we'll see how non-Roma parents don't want their children to study together with Roma children. So this should be part of the general process of the implementation if we want to have really success and effect of these strategies, or whatever they are called in different countries. Then representation, I think, is very important, and was already mentioned by some of the previous speakers. Because so far, Roma only observing of how these strategies are transposed, adopted, and maybe in the future implemented. But they should be given a role, responsibility in the implementation of these strategies. So far, they have been always passive beneficiaries of strategies and programs which somebody else has designed and implements for them. And I think political representation in this sense is very important. Now, I would like to address this issue to the representative of the parliament here. I understand that you are expecting governments to send people, and if they don't send Roma, you cannot do anything. But we should move of the Roma representation in the European institutions from the internship level and go beyond this. Maybe you communicate. I don't want to say impose, because most probably to impose is not possible, but encourage somehow your parties at national level to put Roma representatives in the list during elections, so that they are possibly elected and they reach different levels and different fields. I mean, to be represented in different fields, and mainly in the politics, of course. Hopefully they will be also members of the European Parliament someday. Talking and proposing by the European Commission to member states to take positive action in some fields, I would say why the European Commission doesn't give an example to national member states which are anyway hesitating to take positive measures towards Roma in this sense. Some positive measures in taking Roma into the structures, employing Roma, training them or prepare them for the entry concours or whatever. Positive measures at European level, so it could be example for national member states. Thank you very much.
I have only one question. This is too easy question. How the people from the European Commission help us with the national strategy? I think that national strategy must become national document according to law, according to Czech, Bulgarian, or national law. Because all problems which we here discuss is about broken of rules and constitutional rules and some law and directives from European Commission. And we must put this problem on the high level or on qualitatively new level. The Roma strategy, national strategy, become documents according to law. If the government, and doesn't matter which kind of political party or the political government will be in the state, doesn't matter. It will be according to law. Can you help us with this? Thanks.
If I get it right, what you are advocating here is basically for a legal commitment when we are discussing about the Roma issues. And unfortunately, and it has to do with Orhan's question, what is happening if the member states are not basically adopting a strategy which is not in compliance with the communication. And I think that we have to be realistic here. And if we are looking on the Race Equality Directive, after 2000 when it was adopted, 5 member states were brought before the European Court of Justice due to a lack of effective transposition. So it has to do a bit, to some extent, to your question, but the idea here is that we do not have a legal commitment. We do have a political commitment, and I would say we do have the highest political commitment at this point in time, but that's it. And I think that's why the European Parliament should play a role, a crucial role, because the European Parliament may supervise, oversee, let's say, how the Commission is fulfilling this process when the member states are adopting and afterwards implementing strategies.
Thank you. There's one more comment only from my side before you also give feedback related to your last point. We are all here in agreement that the Parliament should play a role. But now we need to see what this role means and what practically, as of tomorrow, we can do. Mr. Svoboda suggested a working group or ad hoc group. Obviously, when we all have criticism from different countries, we have data that shows ineffectiveness of governments of local authorities in different countries. Whom to give this information? We need to have an entry point or entry points in the European Parliament, either a designated person in every party group or a committee or some sort of a procedure where people from civil society can supply you with information that you are lacking at the moment. So let's be a bit more concrete, so we have a more concrete idea, and when we go home from tomorrow we know what might be the outcome of our time that we spent here today.
Okay. Yeah, just a short comment, if it's going to be useful based on what you just said about the new structure that can be created in terms of participation of governmental representatives at the same time as civil society representatives. We have a very representative example of good best practices in the United Nations. It's called Human Rights Council. This is where we have ambassadors from different countries, 47 states, member states, and also civil society representatives. This is where we have also the submission of national reports, and where those national reports are discussed in between member states, and also civil society has voice to intervene and comment on those national reports. And not only vocally, not only orally, but also written, because the civil society can submit reports to the Secretariat of the Office of the High Commissioner, and the Secretariat does a resume of all the recommendations from the civil society. So I'm not sure whether you are aware of this mechanism. Of course you are. And the UPR process, which is a very systematic process of reviewing all the countries of member states of the Human Rights Council. So I'm not sure whether this kind of feedback is towards this kind of a group that you're thinking of. Thank you very much.
Yes, sorry, I have to go after this statement from my side, but first of all, two very brief remarks to what you said. The one is on the positive actions, or let's say positive discrimination. Yes, I agree that it is important that we go beyond internship and so on. We have to do more. I agree. I only said how it is the situation at the moment. And I know that Valerio, for example, in his country, pressed very much for more candidates from the Roma community, also for the European election, which would be very helpful as well. And we should not give up. The fact that we have now less than we had in the last parliament, but I think we have to fight for it, and you have to fight for it. On the question of the law, well, we are not from the Commission, we are from the European Parliament, but nevertheless, I think it is true that we have to put pressure that the breaking of the law is not tolerated in the countries. And you spoke about the question of, for example, the Roma attacks during the Hungarian presidency, or what happened in Bulgaria. It was not officially organized, no, not at all, but the way sometimes officials, including police, behaved when, for example, these kind of iron guard came into the villages and to fight against the Roma, I think that was absolutely unacceptable. And that is also the reason why we need European engagement. But we often see that on the national level one is very complacent or very, very timid as well. Because the mayor says, well, I need the majority to be re-elected, and if I do too much for the minority, maybe I lose the majority. Let's be frank. Very often this is thinking. He doesn't think you have to involve and engage a minority in order to get more votes, but he thinks engaging into the causes of minority costs him some votes. And therefore, I think we have to have that kind of European issue. Now, specifically to what we can do, of course, we have also a human rights subcommittee. But this human rights subcommittee is a subcommittee of the Foreign Affairs Committee and deals with human rights outside the European Union. And the Civil Liberties Committee deals with human rights issues inside the European Union. But then we have, as I said, social affairs, regional affairs, many others, because we have much more instruments to do something. It's not only a question of human rights. It's a question of social rights, of social support, of infrastructure building, and so on. Therefore, I'm thinking about, we have different ways. We have a sort of special committee, but we also have, and we had it once at least, because I was member a working group out of different committees who was looking at the financing of Palestine, for example. It was the example I know, it's a long time ago, where we didn't have this formality of a special committee, but nevertheless a working group. And we have to speak and with you and the other people what we can do in order, because let's be frank, I'm fed up to come to conference again and again. And you probably as well, and always the same speak. The one says it's a wonderful program we have, the other says it's not a wonderful program, it has many deficiencies, but we don't go really in the detail, we don't speak about what can be done. And therefore I speak, and we will speak with Mr. Verhofstadt and other colleagues from other groups, if we couldn't do something in that direction, because that I think would be rather very helpful. As Mr. Verhofstadt is here anyway, I can leave the podium and hand over to him, and I'm perfectly sure, although he's from another political group, he will fight in the same direction. I'm sorry, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a short intervention. I'm also not intending to get into a confrontational debate with Mr. Dinka, especially because personally I believe that the National Agency for Roma is not so powerful at the level of the Romanian government in order to do the things as they would like to do them. A lot of members of the Roma agency are Roma there. But nevertheless, I come from an NGO that has a complaint against the Romanian president in front of the European Court for Human Rights, 2 complaints against the ministers of foreign affairs. When I speak, I always have proofs, because this is the exercise of my organization. The consultation. The 3 meetings that were organized in the government were asked to be organized by the coalition that is actually coordinated by the Soros Foundation and the Roma Civic Alliance. So it was not the initiatives of the Romanian government. The meeting that took place in the Romanian parliament towards the national strategy, it was again an initiative of the Soros Foundation and the Roma Civic Alliance and the Romanian parliament. So therefore, we can, discuss every of these initiatives and see who was interested to do a coordination or a consultation on the process. But I will not get into that, although, as I said, I have a lot of proofs for any of the things that I mentioned. But I think the real challenge for the Romanian government now is to see if the Romanian national strategy, as it looks in the public consultation, can be improved, taking into consideration the 50 pages of the civil society that I mentioned, but also other inputs from the Commission. And there are some things that are very clear: indicators, targets, budget, responsible institutions, and I think that beside that there are a lot of other details that has to be taken into consideration, but minimum standards has to be considered. And I think that beside the European Commission pressure, we have to take into account also the pressure from other member states that are in a bilateral agreement, cooperation with Romania, and I specifically mentioned France. So once again, it is your challenge now, the government, the Roma National Agency, to prove that the consultation took place. That means that you take into consideration our comments.
Thank you. Only 2 short suggestions. First, one of the main requirements of Roma civil society in Bulgaria now is to have the National Roma Integration Strategy as document approved by the National Parliament, because all the other documents until now are approved by the government, and they're different type of documents. If the document is approved by the Parliament, it will engage more institutions and it will be much more heavy. So my appeal to the distinguished representatives of the European Parliament is to put pressure on our national parliaments to be as engaged with Roma integration as European Parliament is. We are very grateful to the European Parliament for the support from many years, and we want to see such kind of support. So my suggestion is, through the means of European Parliament and through the means of the different political parties, to help our national parliaments approve these documents. They will be much different when they are approved by the national parliaments. And the second suggestion is, I just want to stress what Mr. Svoboda and after this Željko said.
our meeting today will have clear outcome if there is a clear idea for working group or for ad hoc group here in the European Parliament as our focal point here in the Parliament. This will be great. Thank you.
Entirely related to what was mentioned before. Talking about the legal dimension, well, the person who made the point is out, however, but there is still two issues that are important. One, of course, national strategy should be based on the legal frame. Nobody's denying this. The problem is sometimes the legal frame is dubious. So the legal national frames should be based on the principles that the European Union establishes as undeniable. And this is field for play there. That's what is on the stake right now, and this is why it's so important that the Fundamental Rights Agency plays a role in this, establishing the national strategies and submitting the conclusions, the objectives as a way of promoting coherence within the European member states. So that's the first issue, right? They are national strategies, but as long as there is no a common approach with the European vision, it's going to be difficult. And linking this with the national parliaments, I mean, this is the point. A national parliament strategy, a proposal that is not linked with the global common approach at the European level, might not be the best solution. Not always. It depends on how the European institutions establish what are the minimum standards that should be implemented in every member state. So this is obviously a double track game. Very linked with what was mentioned by you, I think, on the question of the bottom-up approach. I think the person who mentioned, well, he has gone anyway. Because, of course, when we deal with the citizens' initiatives there is a way of promoting some ideas through the civil society to the national parliaments, but also from the European institutions. So those two are the two-track ways that we can approach. And why I'm saying this? Because I fundamentally see one lack in the European law as such, is the multiple discrimination principle. And this is something that is blocked by the Council, which means the member states. So Europe is complex, as you may imagine, but it doesn't mean that changes cannot be done. So that's what we have to do, everybody pushing from their side to move all the boxes, the complex boxes, on the same and the right direction.